Presidential Fiscal Policy and Tax Reform Committee.
Mr. Taiwo Oyedele. Mr. Taiwo Oyedele is the chairman of the Presidential Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms Committee, set up by the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu in August 2023. This pivotal committee is tasked with spearheading comprehensive reforms with a focus on fiscal governance, revenue transformation, and facilitating sustainable economic growth and competitiveness. Before his current role, Mr. Oyedele was a prominent figure at PwC, where he served as the fiscal policy partner and Africa tax leader. With over 2 decades of experience at PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, including more than a decade in senior leadership role, he amassed extensive expertise in tax advisory, reform advocacy, business strategy consulting, leadership development, and policy decision and execution. His other prominent positions held include thematic lead of the Fiscal Policy and Planning Commission and chairman of the West Africa Debt Management Roundtable at the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, chairman of the Taxation and Fiscal Policy Faculty, board of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, member of the Nigerian Tax Standards Board of the Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria, and member of the Ministerial Committee on the Design and Implementation of Nigeria's National Tax Policy. Mr. Oyedele, he is an author, keynote speaker, mentor, and a respected commentator on finance, business, and economic issues. He is a fellow of the Nigerian Leadership Initiative, former member of the Global Tax Forum and Council of the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants. His academic contributions include serving as an associate professor at Babcock University and as a guest lecturer at the University of Lagos and the Lagos Business School. He's an alumnus of the London School of Economics and Political Science, Yale University, Harvard Kennedy School of Executive Education, and Mr. Oyedele also served as an examiner and contributed to the development of curricula of leading professional bodies. In addition to this, his professional and academic achievements, Mr. Oyedele is dedicated to social impact as the founder and president of the Impact Africa Foundation. His visionary leadership and commitment to excellence continues to inspire transformative change across social, fiscal, and economic landscapes. Can we please give another round of applause to Mr. Taiwo Oyedele?
Thank you. Thank you very much. You may have your seat. Thank you and good afternoon. So I didn't know they were going to read all of that. Okay, so in the limited time that I have, which I think is about 30 minutes, I have a lot to share with you. So I'll go straight into it and I'll keep it simple. But I'm going to challenge many of us on some of the things we've held on to for so long. So please let me apologize in advance if you find yourself struggling to agree with some of the things I'll be saying. You can process them later. I have decided that I will title my presentation, May Nigeria Work for Me. Yes. You will get the context as we go along. I've structured my presentation into 5, and my brother did a very good job, so made my job extremely easy. So the 5 parts that I'm going to be speaking to, it's about Nigeria, and by extension, it's about you. The first part is what was. In other words, where we were. Then we move on and talk about what is, which is where we are now. We move on to number 3, which is what could have been. In other words, where we were heading if we did nothing differently. Economists will call it counterfactual outcome, but we're going to keep it simple. We're not using those, economist terminologies. Number 4 is going to be what to expect. In other words, where we are going, what is possible, and the outlook. We will conclude by looking at what it means for you. You see, all the 5 are what, right? What it means for you means, where do you come in? What do you need to do? The way I see it. So let's start. What was? Our Nigeria was a country where we were living on window dress realities. If you look back to about 2 years ago, Naira exchange rates, depending on who you ask, was 460, was 750, or anything in between. But was that really the exchange rate? If you wanted to buy petrol, it was under 200 naira. Was it really under 200 naira? The same thing, there wasn't band A at the time. Electricity was whatever it was, but was that the true price? And there's nothing wrong, absolutely nothing wrong, if a country can afford to sell petrol for 200 naira. There's really nothing wrong with that. Everything is wrong if you cannot afford it. I'm a parent, right? I should send my kids to school. There's no conversation needed about that. If I can afford a school of 50 million naira per term, fantastic. If I cannot, they will do only first term. And the entire family will be bankrupt. They won't be able to complete the education. Maybe I should look for a school of 200,000 naira per term. Use prayer to support it. After all, many of us, we didn't go to Harvard. Those Harvard that they read was adult education. So Nigeria looked artificially better than it really was. And then we had this sense of our economy is not great, but it's also not too bad. But because we're not facing our realities, we thought that our economy was the largest in Africa. Our GDP was around $450 billion. Some people said, this Tinubu came within 2 years, Nigeria economy became number 4, number 5. He did not lose half of it. That value was lost. We just didn't recognize it. We didn't calculate it. We thought our per capita income was around $2,000 per person. We have now realized it's not up to that. Fiscal deficit to GDP was rising. Nigeria spent 96%. Let's just say 100%. When they taught us maths in school, they said you can round off stuff. So 96% and 100% are almost the same. Nigeria spent all its revenue to service debt. We were not paying the debt back, just to service it. In other words, every other thing we did, from paying salaries, to fighting Boko Haram, to traveling abroad and allowances, we borrowed. We were not borrowing at 1 and 2%, because borrowing has class and category. When Japan borrows, in fact, until recently, Japan was borrowing at negative interest rates. Their debt to GDP ratio is over 200%. But if, my brother, I can borrow 1 million naira from you, We both agreed that I will pay you back 950,000. You agreed, me I agreed. Why should I not borrow more? When Nigeria borrows, it's not just double digits, it's high double digits. Those were the borrowing we're using to do everything, and our revenue was just paying for debt service. If anybody was not losing their sleep with just that alone, they must be from a different planet. The outcome of what was happening to us was predictable 100%. It was a Sri Lanka waiting to happen. It was a Venezuela. There are countries where you hold money and you'll not be able to find fuel to buy. There was a time in Sri Lanka when you couldn't drive your car every day of the week. They told you when you could drive because there's no fuel. Our GDP growth rate was very low. Over the past 10 years, less than 2%. If you do it in real terms, dollar terms, it was negative. Waste and means was high. We were printing money to spend. Of course, if you were using your revenue to service debts, everything else you need to borrow, right? The borrowing capacity was limited because you couldn't borrow abroad. You know why? Because the person that wants to lend you money will say you are too risky. It's just like you are a very poor person. You walk to the top bank in Nigeria, you say, I have potentials. If you can only give me about 2 million naira loan, they won't give you. They will be asking for cash flow and you don't have it, right? So, because we couldn't borrow abroad and the capacity to borrow locally was limited, we started printing money to spend. That was even a bigger danger than anything else. Every time you print money, you know, it's simple arithmetics. If the value of everything in Nigeria was 1,000 and you have 1,000 naira, it's 1 to 1. The value has not increased. You printed 200 naira. The value of 1 naira before falls by 20% that you just printed. Ladies and gentlemen, we printed close to 40 trillion naira. Printing and the interest on it. And then we are surprised there is inflation subsequently. What else were we expecting? Human capital development was subpar. We're not focusing on education, we're not focusing on health. We are a physical people. Nigerians don't realize that the invisible controls the visible. If I commission a road, that's dividend of democracy. If I try to invest in education, skills development, innovation, I'm not doing anything. They can't see what I'm doing. Look at the reforms that have taken place in the past 18 months. They're not visible. FX is not, you can't see it. Where is the place where they did the FS solution? Where is the one where they did PMS? We had backlog of exchange of unmet FX demand. Even some airlines stopped flying to Nigeria. Nigeria became #1 in the world for the highest level of indebtedness to airlines. In the whole world, it was Nigeria. Poverty was rising very, very fast. And the economy was largely distorted. If you wanted to manufacture something and you set up a factory, you need to do a lot of hard work and pray to God and face a lot of risk, and there's no guarantee you even break even. But if you are very close to someone in government, maybe CBN, you don't need to put money down. They just need to allocate $1 million to you. You don't need to pay. We allocate to you on credit. You pay by the following day or evening. Take $1 million at $460. Sell it at $750. Easily, you have made close to 300 million naira without lifting a finger. The guy that is building factory is still trying to finalize documentation for C of O for the land. You've cleaned out with 300 million. So why should you stress yourself? You then direct all your energy towards building those connections so you can make the easy money. But for every 1 naira that is made like that, It is the blood of the Nigeria economy that is being extracted. It is the seed that we should have implanted that was being eaten. We were suffocating the real sector. Many of the companies that exited, it was the closing chapter for them. It was a build-up of so many things. Anyway, I think enough said. That is what was. Now, what is? How about now? I'll be dishonest if I stand here and I say to you that it's all fine now. Of course you won't even believe that, because you're smart people. So we're not there yet. But you know what? They say it is always darkest before dawn. I personally believe, and this is based on data, that the worst is behind us. And it can only get better going forward. Like my brother Shegun said, this is not a prayer. I believe in prayers, but this is not prayers. This is telling you facts based on data, the way I see them. Why do I say that? For the first time in my adult life in Nigeria, Nigeria is carrying out structural reforms. This is when you see a house that is almost falling down and you just paint it. That's what we're doing before. This time around, we said, let's break down, pull down the walls, and rebuild the foundations. That is structural. Do you know how many times Nigeria removed fuel subsidy in the past? I've lost count. I don't know anybody here who knows how many times since independence we had removed fuel subsidy. Why is it that it's always coming back? Does it have 9 lives? It was because we thought we removed subsidy, but we knew we did not. You can only remove subsidy when you set the market structures for price determination. If that structure has not been set, you know what? Even when the president said May 29 subsidy was gone, we didn't set that market mechanism, was not set. So people started looking at the price. NNPC said, don't worry, that's not the price. NNPC said, the price is this. NNPC was setting the price of PMS. Before we could blink, subsidy was back. And the other thing about this subsidy is that the level of fraud and corruption inside it is better imagined. Because the incentive for fraud is so huge, there's almost nothing else you could do but to remove that subsidy. As painful as it has been, I believe that it is the necessary decision that we eventually took as a country. And we can now say that for once, subsidy is gone. I'm not sure I'll be very popular with these words I'm saying, but it's good that this is being recorded. Maybe about 2 years later, some people will watch it and say yes. Now, I'll tell you, in terms of what is, 3 things that stand out for me. One of it is economic stability. Okay? You know, stability does not mean that you are in the place you want to be. It means that you stop going up and down, because not knowing whether you're up or down in itself is stressful and it can be painful. Right? Market confidence is returning. Do you know that one of the indicators is when foreign portfolio investment is coming? It's an indicator of confidence, but short-term confidence. But it is confidence. When foreign direct investments start coming in, that is long-term confidence. But you know what? Locally within Nigeria, there's a measurement. It is the capital market. The capital market is not stupid. When you pay for the price of any shares in the stock market, you are not buying today, you are buying tomorrow. That is why Tesla, for example, the profit they are making, in fact, Amazon made losses for only God knows how many decades. And their share values were going up, right? Nvidia started making profit not long ago. So people were buying tomorrow. So people are seeing tomorrow. And that is why for the past 2 years, our capital market has done well, and it can do even better. Let me give you another important data. Our fuel consumption, just PMS, was said to be around 70 million liters a day. That's what they told us. We had no other means of verifying whether it is true or not, right? NMDPRA says for truck out, as you carry it and you leave, their own count was around 66 million liters a day. But you know what? It is now down to around 40 or even less. You know that difference we have saved is equivalent to at least $20 million per day. I'm not saying that is government revenue. I'm saying that is the demand pressure on FX that has disappeared. $20 million every day has disappeared in terms of what we needed to find, or the opportunity cost of the crude oil would have sold. Just imagine pressure of $20 million every day coming back, right? And do you know that, in my own estimation, 90% of our economic problem as we can see them are tied to FX. So people think it's fuel subsidy removal. No, it is not. The fuel subsidy removal is very marginal impact. I looked at the exchange rate of South Africa 10 years ago, the exchange rate of Kenya 10 years ago, and the exchange rate of our dear country Nigeria 10 years ago. I looked at their imports to GDP, exports to GDP, and the nets for the past 10 years. Guess what? Nigeria was not doing worse than South Africa or Kenya. And if Nigerian Naira had maintained the same level of stability as Kenya shillings or South African rand, do you know that Naira today will be about 260 Naira to the dollar? Don't do any magic, just the same level with your peers, who's there. But why is it? Imagine if Naira were to be 260 to the dollar today. Even PMS itself, it will respect itself, it will be around 200 and something. Band A, nobody will complain about Band A. Inflation will not be 34%, right? So why is it that Naira is 1,500 and something? You know what I found out? My brother answered part of the question, but that is the official part. The official part is level of supply and demand. I just told you now that our supply and demand is no worse than Kenya and South Africa, right? People will say Nigeria is heavily import dependent. It's a lie. Import to GDP is under 20%. Most countries, including Africa, they have, even China that is producing for the world, it's more than that. I'll tell you the biggest problem, and we need to be honest with ourselves. Nigeria's biggest problem with FX is not the supply of FX. It is the illicit demand for FX. If I want to be politically correct, I'll say discretionary demand for FX. This discretionary demand is both in the public sector and in the private sector. I'll tell you, in the public sector, there are people who control our resources, and they feel it's first and foremost their own money. For the time that they're there, they collect those monies and they're chasing dollars to buy. Even the central bank said, when they release FAC, we just watch this exchange rate. It seems to just misbehave during that period. 1 million here, 2 million here. And that is still going on, right? So that is not, we don't need that dollar, but we are buying it. That's an artificial demand, or put differently, discretionary demand. The bigger the size of corruption, the bigger the impact of that discretionary demand. But you know what? It's happening also in the private sector. It is not the ordinary man on the street. So many of them have not seen a dollar banknote before in their life. Majority of Nigerians have not seen dollar banknotes before, ever. But the elites, high net worth individuals, the super rich, and some middle class, There's a self-fulfilling prophecy when you think that Naira will lose value. You're converting all your savings into dollars. The domiciliary account balance has increased by more than $6 billion in the past 18 months. The balance is over $30 billion. I was with a billionaire during the Christmas break. And he said to me that, Taiwo, you know this problem is a big issue that you guys have to solve. I said, tell me more about it. And then one thing led to another. He said to me that, do I know that, he needed 50 million. You know the kind of money rich people need. He said he needed 50 million naira and he did not have naira. Right? Because he's converted everything to dollars. He called his friend. The friend said, me too, it's only $1 that I have. I said, sir, how are we supposed to solve this problem? It is all of us together. The public sector have their own part of this blame, and so is the private sector. Imagine that we just take off that demand from the market. Then Naira can be at the level of South Africa and Kenya. Because those are the things that those people do differently than us. You go to South Africa and you want to pay for a hotel, you bring dollar, they will send you to go and find rand. They don't collect dollars from you. Anyway, so I was talking about stability. So we expect stability in terms of where we are now. Then we expect growth to start setting in. And I'm not talking about 3% growth. It needs to be more than that. And more importantly, it needs to be inclusive. Because if two sectors are growing, and they outgrow the other sectors that are not growing, you say the economy is growing. And that's the danger of averages. When you say inflation is this, right? Inflation is 34%. But there's someone that the entire household income, they use it to buy food. And food inflation is 100%. Their own food inflation is not even the food inflation that everybody is calculating. They always buy just Gari and yam. Gari and yam have gone up by 100%. Their own inflation in their household is 100%. They are not interested in MBS data. There was a book I read that says, there was this analogy I like a lot. The danger of averages was the point about it, not the title of the book. It says it's like a man lying down. Half of his body is inside the freezer. The other half is inside the oven. And the man says, I'm fine. He will not be fine for too long, right? The average of the oven and the freezer looks normal, but neither of them is okay for any human being who wants to stay alive. So while the averages are okay for general information, policymakers must pay attention to how they affect households, because everybody has their own realities. So growth also means, because we have eliminated distortion, instead of trying to have connection with CBN governor to get $1 million to round trip, I now have to channel my energy to how do I build something of value, and that's good for the economy. We have human capital development, NEL fund. People underestimate the impact of NEL fund. In my foundation, one of the things we do is to sponsor indigent kids to school. And I've seen families where they couldn't find 3,500 naira and they sent the boy home. The scholarship we gave was 5,000 naira. The woman came from the home, knelt down and broke down in tears. 5,000 naira. They just lost the dad, the parent, the father of the kid. 2 weeks before then, the boy was sent. It was at 5,000 naira saving grace. There are lots of people that should be in university today. Their parents can't afford anything. If you can get a loan that is interest-free, you go to school. You know what is even more interesting? You get a stipend to spend. So you know there is hope for tomorrow. And you don't have to pay back until you start working. And that also includes skills development. Government can use that to even redirect people towards degrees that are useful. You know, some things we are learning in university, even us, we don't know what it means. And I don't want to be condescending on anyone, so I won't give you any examples. But I'm sure you can think about one or two. We We can pay teachers well. I'm a lecturer myself. I lecture in 3 universities. I usually don't collect their money because the money looks like an insult. A professor is being paid 400,000 naira a month. If your body is in school, your heart, soul, and mind cannot be there. How do you survive as a professor with 400,000 naira a month? I have been in a class before outside Nigeria for an executive course, and the professor said to me, I earn $800,000. I just opened my mouth. I didn't know that I was opening the mouth like that. $800,000 a year, professor. And this professor does not even work 8 hours a day. Even if that professor does not like education, education will like him. So what we have now is not going to work. If you can't attract the right lecturers, your education cannot develop. It doesn't matter how well-meaning you think you are. It's a give and take. You cannot give what you don't have. We think this will help with that. There's consumer credits. The reason why some people steal it, why do I have to work for 35 years to save money to build a house in the village? So by the time I finish building the house, I'm very close to answering God's call. Whereas in most countries, from day one, I can live in that house and pay for 35 years, right? So consumer credit. You can also direct that towards local economic development. I can say that I'll give you a loan if you are buying a car that is made in Nigeria. Consumer credit. Instead of banning import, I won't ban imports. I will just encourage you to buy local stuff. So let me move on to number 3. What could have been? Many people compare wrong data. They say they should just have left us where we were. You know, inside the Bible there was something like that as well, right? So, if we didn't do anything differently, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be very, very close now to an economic meltdown. And I think that the first indication of that would be that you hold 10,000 naira and you will not find 1 liter of fuel to buy. The NNPC had finished using all Nigeria's entitlements. That means your equity crude, profit oil. They also start taking tax oil. Not only their own tax, the tax of other companies in the sector. They use all of that to do subsidy. It was not enough anymore. They say, how about the production we have not produced? Yeah? They say using future production to subsidize current subsidy consumption. Just imagine that for a moment, what that even means. When you keep using the future production, right, it will get to a point there's no future production again. That is when you hold 10,000 naira, you will not find 1 liter of petrol to buy. When it gets to that point, you will not have an orderly manner to reform the economy. And people don't know that the middle class are lucky. You know, when people say that, these are people, they are not aware, they vote for the wrong person, you are blaming the wrong people. That's their capacity. Those people are not the ones to hold government to account because they do not know what the right thing should be. The middle class are the ones to hold government to account. When those people below middle class want to hold government to account, the government they see is not the people in National Assembly or their governor. Anybody that is doing better than them is part of them. So they hold government to account by burning down everything on their parts. That's not what we want. So what could have been is that if we didn't do that, we'll get to a point where you will not find any dollars to buy. For so long, NNPC was not remitting anything. You will not find dollars to buy for anything, whether you are importing inputs or assets or equipment or even food. Inflation will be hyperinflation. In Tanzania, and I think I brought the money. In Tanzania, not Tanzania, Zimbabwe, apologies. Zimbabwe perfected the art of printing money to spend. And the answer was very obvious. So this currency you see in my hand, this is 100 trillion Zimbabwe dollars. I'll repeat, 100 trillion Zimbabwe dollars. That's not the end of the story. It is that this money, as at that time, could barely buy a loaf of bread. So I got this from my partner friend who was in Zimbabwe. At the time, we had an event in Cape Town, so I usually like to ask people about what's happening in their country. So the guy said to me, I said, how is your inflation? How are you coping? He said, they are not coping. And it was being real. He said, we are not coping. I said, how? He said, if you enter public transport, you know, when you're getting into the bus, they'll say how much, they'll tell you the amount. Hold your 200 naira. In Zimbabwe, they were not telling you the amount because it was a waste of everybody's time. The amount when you get on the bus is different from when you're getting down. So we tell you the amount when it's time to get down. If you don't come down quickly, we hold you back because the price has gone up. And I'm not joking. I'm not joking. The percentages were no longer 1 trillion percent. It was more than 1 trillion. 6 trillion percent was their inflation. They were collecting audit fees with goats. In fact, there was a woman who wanted to pay school fees, went to school to ask for the school fees, ran back to carry the goat and she got back, the amount has gone up 2-fold. So, you know, it was not surprising when they had to discontinue with their currency. It wasn't working. That is the danger. You don't do the right thing at the right time. But you also know that this where we could have been. People misanalyze it, and sometimes we use wrong data for making decisions. If your diagnoses are wrong, your prescriptions will be wrong, and the solutions will not fix the problem. In fact, you end up creating more problems than before. And some of these issues is people will say, you know, there's excess money supply, and I'm saying it's wrong or right. But if you put it in context, like cash in circulation is 4-something trillion in an economy of 260 trillion. Look around the world. What's the percentage of cash in circulation? We should be praising ourselves instead of beating ourselves up. People will say everybody has jackpot. No. You look at the data, Nigeria is not even top in Africa, including everybody that has been abroad ever. And people that just joined them. Nigeria is not even up to average. It's below the global average. People will say that government is too big and we need to cut it down. You know, I said I'm going to challenge some of your thoughts. Do you know that the size of the public service in Nigeria, everybody employed by government, MDAs, local government, state government, federal government, is under 5 million? In the US, the number of public servants, people employed by the government, is over 22 million. The US is 330 million people. We were 240. They're not even very far from us. If we prorate, Nigeria is supposed to be around 15 million, isn't it? So the problem with Nigeria's public sector is not a size problem. It is an efficiency and productivity problem. So why don't we focus on that which is important to the outcomes we want? And then there's also sometimes, you know, the data we use wrongly as common, as harmless, as saying that Ghana is next door neighbor. You know, it's not next door neighbor. There are two countries between Nigeria and Ghana. Somebody will wake up and say there are women are more than men in Nigeria. That's why they can't find men to marry. The data says we are equal, 50. Yeah, so I suppose the point I'm saying here is, in terms of what could have been, you must take data, turn it to insights, and be humble to not jump into conclusions so that you get the right comparison. Okay. There is this thing about people who say the states are over-dependent on FAC. In fact, they call it federal allocation. You know, it is not federal allocation. It is federation allocation. The federal government is very dependent on FAC as well. And some people will say that IMF and the World Bank are the people asking us to, in fact, they say Nigeria devalued the Naira. They say, why did we devalue the Naira? And I say, okay, so Nigeria did not devalue the Naira. Nigeria removed the subsidy on FX. If you didn't remove that subsidy, what option did you have? You know, if they say National Assembly people, you know, this is one of the, most talked about. National Assembly people are collecting too much money, 20-something million. They pay lecturers, 100,000 professors. They pay minimum wage, only 70,000. These are wicked people. If you say that narrative, people will clap for you. But guess what? It's the wrong narrative. I'll tell you what it is. First and foremost, Nigeria should get to a point where you pay your top public officials about what you pay top private sector officials. The work I'm doing for government now, I say don't pay me because the amount you're going to pay me is an insult, just like the university one. But I could do that because I can afford to take care of myself. Imagine that I have so much to give to Nigeria, but I have no money to take care of my family, right? The government's money cannot sustain my quality of life. So I have two options, either not to serve in government or to steal, right? Because I need to survive. I'm not justifying stealing, by the way, don't get me wrong. But Nigeria must get to a point where we stop saying narratives that are moving us in the wrong direction. There's no way the president should earn less than a bank manager. Those amounts that the lawmakers are collecting, constituency money and all of that, all of it, they just combine it together, But we had a session with lawmakers, and one senator said to me, that do I know that the average, the least amount that any senator spent to come to the National Assembly was 500 million naira. The least. They have to do this to get nomination. I won't tell you all the details of where they spend the money, right? Now, 500 million naira. So if you get elected, you have to recoup 500 million naira. That's stage one. Nobody invests money just to break even. You need a premium. It could have been, some of it is bank money at 30%. When you now finish that, you want to come back, right? Coming back will not be 500 million. These things increase every election cycle. So you have to estimate that coming back will require about 1 billion. You must find the 1 billion. So when you say, why are they not collecting minimum wage? The math is not adding up. What we need to fix as a country is, why is it that you have to spend that much to serve? That is where the problem is. Even for the ordinary Nigerian, you go there and tell them the story of what you want to do. They are telling you that you have to fix this road, you have to pay this school fees. While we were having that session, the senator showed me his message, SMS. There were already 5 demands. It was not even half day. Okay, let me move on. So let me say this last one before I move on actually. They talk about real interest rates, and my brother mentioned it. And real interest rates is a good point to make, except that it is not complete. I will divide all of us into 3 groups. There are the big guys. They invest in fixed income investments. Bond, bills, commercial papers, put 100 million there and just collecting your returns, right? If the returns they get is less than inflation, they'll say their real return is negative. Are we together? And that is correct. But there are other 2 categories of people. The next set of people are the people who are not the big guys. Their money is not enough to buy treasury bills. You can't go to treasury bills with 1,500 naira. The money is for deposits inside the bank. Do you know how much they get? The amount they get is single digits. As they are raising interest rates, the gap between how much they get for their savings and inflation widens. While we are closing the negative real returns for the big guys, we are expanding it for the general people. The third category are the people in the real sector who are doing business. Every time you raise interest rates to the manufacturer, the cost of financing their working capital has gone up. The purchasing power of the customer has come down. Their profit margin has been squeezed. Their returns has just reduced. Their own negative returns has been expanded. That is why today manufacturers have over 1 trillion naira of unsold inventory. The same manufacturers that have reduced their capacity utilization, so they are producing less and they have more unsold. So while we are balancing real returns, I suppose my message here is let's balance it for everyone. So the next one is what the outlook is, and I'll try and quickly wrap up. In terms of the outlook, we expect that the worst is behind us and things will turn for the better. We are turning the corner. Whether it's inflation you look at, my view is that if the prices of goods and services in 2025 remain at the level of 2024, inflation is 0%. That's what it means. So why are we expecting that inflation in 2025 will rise over 2024 by more than 15-16%? Why do we think that is not possible? And the reason why it's important, inflation expectation can become your reality. If you expect that inflation will be very high, it will be very high. Because every time you sell one thing, you add a little bit to it, because when you are replacing it, you don't want to be out of money. So, and then outputs would increase from agri, from industries. We have seen oil and gas is getting better. We expect that monetary policy rates would begin to moderate. We expect that the exchange rate will be stable and maybe even appreciate, if you look at all these numbers and data I've given to you. And then, of course, I need to talk about the tax reforms. Part of the expectation is we expect the tax reforms to be approved, particularly the tax reform bills, in 2025. Our expectation is before the end of Q1, and therefore we can give notice to taxpayers to prepare themselves, build capacity, and begin to implement around 1st of July. Those reforms are transformational. They keep me excited. The reason why I have the energy to keep going is because of the possibilities I see in those reforms, which haven't been done since independence. Structurally, those reforms will help Nigeria. They will reduce the pressure even on the monetary policy authorities. There are provisions in those bills to help with naira stability, to help with ensuring that we do not have that premium between parallel market and the official market. If I say to you that in Nigeria today, Nigerian businesses are being asked to pay levies and fees and taxes in dollars, worth over $3.5 billion a year. Who does that? You send your people to the forex market to go and be looking for dollars to pay the government. It does not add $1 to your supply, but it adds $3.5 billion to your demand. We are fixing that. That's pressure off the market. So essentially, the way we look at those reforms are that if you want to run a car race and you have the 1960s 504, and that's Nigeria, and you are in that race with other countries, Bentley, Ferrari, and then this guy with the 1960 car, he says, I'm very prayerful, I believe in God. It will not work. Because faith without work is not going to work, right? You need to get a new car. The tax system that we have now cannot take us forward. It's holding us back. That's why we need to fix it. So I'll conclude with, what does it mean for you? Number one, please look for the opportunities. Reduce the negativity. Nigerians are one of the set of people on earth where they amplify what is not working and play down on what is working. Have you heard many times, may Nigeria not happen to you? Yes. On the average, there's a mass shooting in a school in the US every school day. On the average, every school day. Have you heard anybody say, may America not happen to you? What we have done or what we are doing is we've turned the negativity that we see around and placed it on our country. There's nothing wrong with Nigeria, right? Maybe there are things wrong with people ruling Nigeria. You have to separate the two. If you wish your country bad and you turn it to negativity, it won't work for you. So, for me, I believe that we should work on those things that make people say, may Nigeria not happen to you. But while we are working at it, why don't we turn it to, may Nigeria work for me? So let's turn those negative energy to positive energy. Usually you will see what you find and what you are looking for. You're unlikely to win by following the crowd because there are just too many people with different objectives. Number two, you need to do in terms of what does it mean for you? You need to be diligent and you should act on time. Being diligent means you have to get the knowledge that you need. With the reforms we're doing around tax, I recognize much bigger how the problem is for Nigerians to read. We've taken bills that are about 400 pages, and I'll do something on social media and it's half a page, and I'll receive a lot of complaint that this thing, can't you do infographics? Can't you make it more user-friendly? I say, you cannot read half a page of something that will affect your life. Half a page, people have not read. So that is why a lot of the complaints you see about the bills, I wasn't taking it personal. I know they have not read the bills. So being diligent would include how you decide on investments. It will impact on how you organize yourself, right? It will impact on the decisions you make and how you make those decisions. And you must use data correctly. Don't just go with the flow. Because we've said it 1 million. If we say that Ghana is next door and we say it every day, it doesn't change the fact that Ghana is not next door. There are two countries in between. So make sure you look for the right data, read and think for yourself. It's very important. And the last one is to focus on what you can control. You can't control what the price of PMS will be now if you drive to the station as we speak. You can't control the price of diesel. But do you know what you can control? How you react to it. In my house, we used to on the AC everywhere. You know, then band A came. Then diesel price went up. You know what we now invented? Now, if I'm in the house, only my AC can be on. Everybody must come to my room. We suddenly realized it was helping us to bond better. If you want the AC, come to daddy's room. We use one AC. All of us are still okay. Before it was 7 ACs working at the same time. So focus on the things you can control. Some of them are as simple as this is my AC example. Some of them are more dramatic and impactful in terms of the decisions that you make. You know, Trump is doing his stuff. We can't control that. Trump woke up on Tuesday, a few days ago, and said that on day 1, which is just 2 days to come, 20th, right? Trump says, why is it that we have internal revenue service and we don't have external revenue service? I have never heard that before in my life. Trump wants to set up an external revenue service for the US to tax the rest of the world. He's not joking, you know, but we don't know how he's going to implement it. Whatever he does with that would affect international trade. It will affect Nigeria. But can we stop Trump? No. Should we keep lamenting? No. We should say, if Trump set up external revenue service and impose taxes on the things that we do with the US, how should we respond? And don't do that when the thing is already here. It has been reactive. You need to be proactive. Policymakers must change their mindsets from physical stuff to thinking about long-term and system thinking. Things are connected. They are never isolated. We must build the capacity to deliver the outcomes we want. China is adding electricity, right? Electricity capacity in 1 month than the entire capacity that Nigeria has. Did they produce Chinese from heaven and drop them on earth? No. They're human beings as well. They build the capacity to deliver. And I must drop this one. Multiple taxation is harmful to growth. And overregulation kills development. And if you're looking for the example, look at Europe and look at the US. Europe is very good with regulation, but they overdo it. They've succeeded in killing innovation in Europe. Somebody says America innovates, Europe regulates, and China replicates and enhances. So I close by saying, may Nigeria not happen to you, rather may Nigeria work for you, and may Nigeria win. Thank you very much.
Of applause for our speaker. You may be seated, please. That was an insightful session, and I trust you took a lot of insight from it. I took a lot as well. Take data and turn them to insights. I took that one. Look for opportunities and reduce negativity. And that was such an insightful session. Another round of applause for our speaker.